Oh man, I was 16 when I met her. We were together for 2 years and she was the first girl I had a relationship with that lasted more than a month or so. She was my first love. We attended a house party together on New Year's Eve, but we got separated after the main party ended and everyone went their own way. I left with my friends. She texted me, saying she was tired from the party and heading home to sleep. Unfortunately, the friends I was hanging out with thought it would be a good idea to go back to the house and crash there. When I arrived, I found her in bed with a guy I didn't know and she wasn't wearing any clothes. The next day, we broke up and I haven't spoken to her since. Not the best way to handle the situation, I guess. After that incident, it took me a few years to get into another serious relationship. We dated for a year and then she moved in with me in my small one-bedroom apartment. We lived there together for a year. Eventually, I decided to take a mortgage and buy a 2-bedroom condo. She was still a student at the time, so we mostly relied on my income. She didn't have many classes, so she stayed home a lot. Some of my friends thought she was taking advantage of me since I was the one financially supporting us. I never gave her money directly, but she also didn't contribute her fair share. Sometimes she would buy random groceries, but that was about it. Things started to change when I began working long hours, often doing 12 to 16-hour shifts. Our interactions became less frequent. She became more engrossed in her phone, and my jokes no longer amused her. It seemed like everything I did annoyed her to some extent. Our bed life also completely fizzled out. I didn't even bother asking if she wanted to join me when I went out with friends because all of my friends seemed to despise her. Anyone noticing the red flags? But I still held on to hope that things could be fixed. Then one day, her phone lit up on the living room table while she was in the bathroom. It was a text from her classmate saying, "I'm really excited to meet you again soon." I'm not proud of what I did next, but that text caught my attention, so I couldn't resist the temptation, and I opened her phone to read part of their conversation. Turns out, they had been seeing each other for a few months already. I was devastated, absolutely crushed. I felt dizzy and sick to my stomach like my entire world was crumbling. I started reading one of the explicit texts out loud, loud enough for her to hear. It described what he wanted her to do to him, and she seemed to play along in her response. And that wasn't the only exchange of that nature. She quickly rushed out of the bathroom, grabbed her phone, and accused me of invading her privacy. I admit I did cross that line and I'm not proud of it. She insisted that it was just messages and nothing physical had occurred, but I couldn't bring myself to believe her. I told her to gather her belongings and drove her to her mom's place. The car ride was silent, both of us knowing it was the end. She cried while I remained stone-faced, trying to appear as cold as possible. I told her I needed some time alone and went back to my place. I poured myself a whiskey, confided in my best friend about what happened, and asked him to come over because I didn't want to be alone. He came over with more drinks. We watched the first 3 Die Hard movies and continued drinking. I let out my frustrations while he listened. The next day, I called in sick from work. Since my friend was unemployed at the time, we went to the grocery store and grabbed some empty banana boxes. We packed all of her belongings into those boxes. After a few days, I reached out to her and we had a conversation. She still maintained that nothing had happened, but we both agreed that our relationship was truly over. I informed her that I had packed up her belongings and she could pick them up while I was at work and leave the key. She followed through with that. That was the last time we had any communication. A few months later, she became pregnant with the other guy and moved in with him. A year later, she was a single mom. She reached out to me last year through Facebook. She sent a message apologizing and admitting that she had started seeing the father of her child before ending things with me. I haven't replied to her message, and honestly, I haven't really given it much thought until now. My current partner, whom I've been with for 6 years, just sent me a message on WhatsApp while I'm at work, saying that she accidentally left my dog outside for half an hour, and now the dog is upset with her. I told her to give the dog a pig's ear as a way to appease it. Second story. To begin with, I'm a 21-year-old guy, and I've been with my wife, who is also 21, since we were in our senior year of high school. We had a child together and got married right after graduating at the age of 18, so we've been together for a little over 4 years. Lately, I've been traveling for work and spending weeks away from home. During one of these trips, my wife started texting me, saying that she doesn't want to be together anymore. It was quite shocking because I was 15 miles away from home, receiving these messages about her not wanting to make our relationship work. We agreed that we would have a more detailed discussion about it when I returned. Around 8 months ago, my wife became best friends with my aunt. They would often hang out together, and I would occasionally join them. My aunt has a boyfriend, whom I've known for more than 10 years, and I consider him part of the family. While I was away for work, my wife spent a lot of time at their house. At that time, I didn't see any issue with it since they were her friends, so I didn't think much of it. So, I come back home after working across the country, and I find out that my wife's friend has been living in our house for free the whole time I was gone. Normally, that wouldn't be an issue because I don't mind helping people out, but this friend completely trashed our house and let it become disgustingly messy. It made me realize that my wife was hardly ever home. Instead, she stayed at my family's house while I was away, completely neglecting our pets, the house, and our child. She would pass our child off to others while she went out partying all the time. Finally, my wife and I sit down to have a serious conversation about our relationship and why things weren't working out. She barely looked at me and couldn't talk for more than 20 minutes before going back to my family's house. She stayed there for a week after I returned, telling me that I'm the problem and talking about co-parenting. She claimed that we were toxic and shouldn't be together. Before I left for work, everything seemed fine between us, or at least that's what I thought. Like any relationship, we've had our ups and downs, but I genuinely believed our relationship was going great. After a week of her avoiding me, she finally came over, and one thing led to another, and we ended up having closeness. She left that night but said she would stay with me another night. However, the next day, she became distant and talked about not wanting to be around me, saying she needed time. Throughout all of this, her friends and my aunt kept telling me to give her space and claiming that she was just confused. Even my aunt's boyfriend came over and gave me relationship advice, although now I realize it was just a manipulative move. On that same day, when she was telling me she didn't want to be around me, she suddenly came over to talk. After talking for 5 hours, I started to suspect she was cheating on me. I said, "Okay, if you're not cheating, let me see your phone." She freaked out, refusing to give me her phone, and then she lied and said she was sleeping with a friend who was living with us. It seemed like she was trying to divert my attention from what was really going on. After some arguing, she eventually gave in and handed me her phone. To my shock, I found hundreds of texts confirming her infidelity. She had been sleeping with both my aunt and her boyfriend, engaging in three-way. Moreover, she was also having a secret affair with my aunt's boyfriend behind my aunt's back. After I discovered her infidelity, she pleaded with me not to leave her. She swore she would change and professed her love for me. She claimed it was a mistake and promised it would never happen again. I decided to let her stay. Although I know it may seem pathetic, my main concern is providing a stable family for our daughter. So, I allowed her to stay and explain the situation to me. She shared what had happened and why she did it. Honestly, most of her explanation revolved around her craving attention and feeling neglected by me. Throughout all this, she continued to beg me not to leave. I later discovered that she had also been exchanging explicit texts with multiple guys she met in bars, as well as contacting her ex-boyfriend. Third story. The past 2.5 years have been a roller coaster ride I never saw coming. It's hard for me to fully capture everything that has unfolded since I discovered my wife's affair with multiple men over a span of about 6 months. I've been desperately trying to hold on to something that might not even exist anymore. We've been married for 12 years and have 4 children, ranging in age from 1 to 11. Sadly, we lost one child at 40 weeks about 6 years ago. Whenever I talk about my family, I always include him because he remains a significant part of who we are. D-Day, the day I found out about the affair, happened to be on my birthday a little over 2 years ago. I had gathered enough evidence to confront my wife and force her to come clean about anything she might have lied about. To my surprise and devastation, she confessed to her infidelity and provided me with answers to all my questions. It was a crushing blow, and I demanded to know every painful detail. I didn't get the full picture that first night, but I had a pretty good understanding of what had transpired. 3 different men over a span of 6 months, with 2 of them involved concurrently for the past 4 to 5 months. It was absolutely sickening. Naturally, I placed a lot of blame on myself. Even to this day, I still carry some of that blame. I believe that I had failed to meet her emotional needs, neglected her, and didn't support her enough in her role as the primary caregiver for our children. Despite working hard to provide for my family and give them a comfortable life, I realized that I had been self-absorbed and not effectively communicating my love for her. I believe that my actions contributed to her choice to be unfaithful. On that first night, she expressed uncertainty about whether she wanted to work things out and asked me, "Do you really want to do this? Is it worth the effort to try and fix this?" I knew she had mentally checked out and had little desire to salvage anything, but I couldn't let go of the woman I deeply loved, even after she caused me so much pain. Why did I choose to stay? In the following days, she ended things with the 2 men she had been involved with. However, she would later have a relapse and meet up with one of them, which only added more pain to the already wounded situation. Meanwhile, I was in a haze, seeking personal therapy and struggling to keep myself together while also trying to work. I was constantly consumed by worries about when the next destructive revelation would come. I became paranoid, monitoring her phone's GPS, checking her social accounts, emails, and anything that could raise a red flag. Surprisingly, she willingly gave me access to her passwords, aware of my actions. Time continued to pass. During the summer of 2019, she finally admitted that she didn't have any emotional attachment towards me anymore and believed that our relationship had lost its spark. She claimed to love me as a person but not in a romantic way. I attempted to explore new hobbies but ended up abandoning them because they reminded me of painful memories. The counseling I was undergoing reached a point where there wasn't much more to discuss without involving my wife, so I decided to stop going. And so, time continued to pass. But why did I stay? I repeatedly suggested marriage counseling, hoping it could help us, but she always rejected the idea, claiming she didn't see the need for it or wasn't ready to address her own emotional wounds. I guess the years of emotional neglect on my part had taken a toll on her and made seeking help unappealing. I suppose it makes sense if she had mentally checked out and didn't want to invest the effort. And so, time continued to pass. We made a terrible decision early on in this whole ordeal by getting pregnant. Yeah, I know, it sounds cringeworthy and not the brightest idea. Maybe it was a way for both of us to escape from all the other horrible things happening around us. The whole story of why we did it and how it didn't turn out as planned is a long one. Our baby boy was born shortly before the pandemic hit and everything went into lockdown. But despite all the challenges, we love our little guy and wouldn't trade him for anything. Having children only adds to the complexity of dealing with infidelity, and if it weren't for our 4 kids, this whole situation might have ended by now. But time keeps moving forward. Surprisingly, the pandemic and the quarantine period actually worked out better for us, or at least for me. There were fewer triggers since we were together most of the time. I was working from home, so we had more opportunities to be around each other. We didn't talk much about the infidelity, and we kind of just carried on with life. Of course, it's still a struggle for me on a daily basis because those negative thoughts never really go away. Deep down, you know that everything is still not okay, but it didn't come up to the surface, so we put on a happy face and almost convinced ourselves that everything was fine. And so, time keeps moving forward. It's not like everything is miserable all the time, you know. Maybe it's just an act on her part, but we still have fun as a family, watch shows together, and yeah, we have a pretty regular bed life. We try to find moments to be alone together and escape from the kids when we can. Thankfully, we have an older child who can babysit, and when we have family visiting from out of town, we usually take the opportunity to get some alone time. But it really throws me off when she tells me she's not truly happy. She went through a period where she lost faith in God because she didn't feel any comfort from it. As a result, she decided to leave our church, and that caused a lot of conflict between us for a while. However, we eventually adjusted to a new normal and started respecting each other's beliefs. I would take the children to our church while she enjoyed some time alone. Unfortunately, she also lost some friendships within our church community, which made her feel even more isolated. In the past few months, she has found a new group of friends, which is great for her because they do fun things like Sunday morning meetups at the park, bar crawls, bonfires, and BBQs. She's been really enjoying spending time with this new community. As for me, it's made me realize that I'm still stuck in the same place I was when all of this started. I can't help but feel paranoid about what she's doing when she's not home, who she's hanging out with, especially since they stay out drinking until the early hours. During these events, she's noticed my concerns and wants me to be supportive of her newfound friendships instead of being negative about her activities. I try to act like it's all okay, but deep down, I'm still hurting. And that brings us to where we are today. We recently had a deep conversation about where we stand, and we both feel like we are heading in different directions. We are starting to think that there are too many differences in our lives now, and it's hard to see things improving. She acknowledges that she's to blame for my current insecurities, so she tries to be careful and avoid telling me everything because she knows it could make me feel anxious or jealous. I try to make her understand that it's even more painful when I have to confront her about her lies, and it would have been much easier if she had been honest with me from the beginning. For instance, she decided to carpool with someone instead of driving herself to a meetup and didn't bother telling me about it. Obviously, I eventually found out, and my initial thought was that she might be cheating on me again. I expressed to her that all I want is honesty, and if the truth is something that will make it easier for me to make a decision, then that's great. After all, if she's truly done with our relationship, wouldn't it be simpler to be open about it instead of continuing to make each other miserable? I'm reaching a point where I don't know if I can handle it any longer. I know this is starting to sound like a rant. It's been a few days since we had a conversation, and it feels like she's not being completely honest about everything. The other night, she went to the store to buy things we needed for our upcoming trip while I put the kids to bed. However, she arrived home late and gave me a false reason for the delay. She claimed that the checkout systems at the store malfunctioned right before closing time, causing a long wait for everyone, but that's a load of nonsense. She doesn't seem to realize that GPS tracking is pretty accurate, and according to it, she was in the store parking lot about 20 minutes before closing. Moreover, the timestamp on the credit card charge and the GPS data match perfectly. I even called the store the next day, and they said they had no issues with their systems the previous night. Then, about 40 minutes later, she finally reaches out to explain what happened and that she's on her way home. Couldn't she have texted me while waiting in line to give me this explanation? I had sent her a text during that same time, but she didn't bother to respond. How long should I tolerate her holding on to this lie before I expose it? And when I do confront her, how should I approach the situation? It seems like if I call her out on most things, she doesn't even try to hide it. I'm just really angry and frustrated. After our conversation about honesty, I think I might tell her that it's best for us to try a separation. Neither of us wants to be the one to actually say it out loud. The only thing that's been holding us back from taking real action is our shared agreement that we want to keep our family together for the sake of the children, not to mention the financial burden of a separation. I'm the only one bringing in income, and she's a stay-at-home mom. It's been said countless times that staying together for the children is not a good enough reason. It's hard to accept that when you're in the midst of this crisis and the last thing you want is to bring something like this up to your children. I just need support and strength from people who understand and can help me navigate this difficult decision. I don't want to take separation or divorce lightly, and I want to approach it in the best possible way. Should I seek advice from a marriage counselor first to get a professional opinion from a neutral party, or do I start the process without informing her? After spending so much time reading posts and opinions on various online forums about infidelity, I've come across different perspectives, but ultimately, I need to do what feels right for me.